Hi everybody, I hope you can hear me, and this is going to be the last session, and but it's not going to be the end of our conversation, because in the next couple of days I will provide individual feedback on the final assignment, which is some of which I already actually had a chance to read, and I will individually answer them, and I will give some remarks, general remarks later in the course as well. But before I do that, I just wanted to say that we tried to cover a lot of things in this course, and mostly to focus on practical things. And this is why this test that you just did was an important evaluation tool to look at the general knowledge level after the course. But what is also important is the practical knowledge that is connected to the individual assignments that you did, which actually are just parts of the big assignment, the final assignment. So if some of you haven't finished or haven't done them yet, just we still have time. In the next couple of days you can finish them and post them on the forum, and I will give feedback on that. So there are also a couple of questions that were raised that you would like me to spend some time later, and I will definitely do that. But let me just try to have a very, how shall I say, thorough but still quick wrap up of the campaign building process. So this is what we were actually on in terms of practical skills that we were focusing on during this course. We were focusing on campaign building, or designing a campaign, and we especially paid attention to online campaigns. Although we looked at campaigns, you remember we talked about the Salt March as one of the campaigns, for instance. So we looked at some campaigns that were done before the age of internet, but we looked at the tools that are available for us in this internet age. So when we say online campaigns and offline campaigns, we're talking about when we talk about building online and offline campaigns, we're talking about three distinct processes. First one is planning, and if you recall, when we talked about planning, we were talking about campaign objectives, we were talking about campaign message, we were talking about the campaign plan and estimates of the number of volunteers and activists that need to be done. And this is practically things that we are going to focus on and we were focusing on when we were developing our campaign plans, which were the assignments. So next, of course, is the implementation of the campaign, and we looked at some of the things related to implementation when, if you remember, we talked about how to write stories or how to use photos as a tool to convey a message, because in our case we primarily focused on online campaigns, and online campaigns, when we focused on them, we focused on the content mostly. So what is the type of information that we're gonna disseminate, and how are we going to use this to convey our message that we developed in the planning phase. And then another thing, as you remember, was the management of the campaign, and there we talked about managing resources, So when we talked about resources, we talked about also a little bit about skills and structure, but we didn't have enough time to develop that part of the campaign building, because this was a limited course. We have a limited time for this course, but however, it is important. The most important thing in campaign management is actually managing resources, but also improving skills and abilities of the people who are involved in the campaign, organizers and activists, and also paying close attention to the structure of the campaign. What is the campaign organization, and how these people are going to be involved in decision making, how they're going to be involved in communication, coordination, etc., etc. So these three exercises, or these three processes, are important in building a campaign: planning, implementation, and management. Of course, with this there is another thing, which is also a feedback, and this is required for revising plans and enhancing implementation, and also making changes in the management. So that goes without saying almost. So when we looked at the campaign plan, just to say for the, I think, 5th or 6th time in this course, I think I said it so many times. These are the questions that the campaign needs to answer. The campaign plan needs to answer. First question is, what is the objective of the campaign? In other words, what do we want to achieve with the campaign? Another question is, what is the campaign message? And this question is, what do we want to say in our campaign? How are we going to communicate with what is the message that we want to communicate with the target audience? The next question is about tactics, and this question focuses on what do we do, and what are the activities that we're gonna do as part of this campaign. And also another, it's also connected to the methods that we're gonna use to convey the message. What are the tools that we're gonna use if we talk about online campaigns? So are we going to use blogs? Are we going to use Facebook posts? Are we going to use YouTube channels? Are we going to use some other forms of communication? And as with offline tactics, what is important here is to use a method of communicating that is going to be easily accessible by the recipient of the message, by the target audience, which is another way to say, let's go where the people are, rather than try to kind of use an obscure channel of communication and ask them to join us there. So we talked about tactics a little bit, and then we also spent some time talking about organization and resources, and we're going to talk about it later again, because there was one question to focus on that a little further. So we will talk about it a little more, especially when we talk about organizing volunteers. This was specifically this is what the question was about. So how do we make a campaign plan? So of course the previous 4 questions are the questions that the campaign needs to answer. But again, we need to start somewhere, and the best way to start is actually to do 2 things. First is to ask ourselves some strategic questions, and also to ask ourselves something about the current situation. So when we talk about strategic questions, this is not so much connected to the campaign plan, but this is an overall strategy of our group, of our organization, of our coalition or informal coalition. But we need to know what is the long-term goal that we want to achieve? What is if you remember, what is the vision and what are the long-term goals of the movement? Because the campaign needs to be in accordance with these goals and needs to be actually the campaign needs to bring us closer to those goals when it is successful. Another thing is the question about methods. That's another serious strategic question before we even begin thinking about campaigns, because we cannot talk about tactics in a particular campaign if we don't make a decision on what are the methods that we're gonna use. And one of the most important decisions here, as it was proven many times in history, is a decision to stick to political methods and to use non-violent action as a tool to achieve change, because this deciding to use non-violence as a method and to use political work as the primary work to achieve political means, achieve political ends, is going to have an impact on the overall campaign. Another thing is the main questions about the structure of the movement or the group that is organizing a campaign. And this is how decentralized, how democratic, how inclusive, and how transparent are we ready to be? Because this is certainly going to have some questions. These questions are certainly going to have some impact on the way we organize and build a campaign. So we didn't focus on this so much in the course, because this is a whole different strategic exercise. But still, in many movements, we can say that people actually do ask themselves these questions, and as the movement grows, these questions become answered one way or the other, because there is also a chance that the movement gives a wrong answer to some of these questions, which then makes the struggle more difficult. But however, I don't wanna go more deeply into this, except that I want to say that it is important to have at least some answer to these strategic questions before answering the practical questions of a campaign. A long-term goal, the method, and the overall structure. So then we are looking at the situation, and we're looking at our capacity. So we have answered some strategic questions, and we're almost ready to build a campaign plan, but we need to do some sort of analysis of the situation. What are the current strengths of the organization or advocacy group that is doing a human advocacy effort? What are the weaknesses, and what are some opportunities that lie ahead, and what are some threats that lie ahead? So listing these four strengths and opportunities helpful, weaknesses and threats harmful to our cause. We can also say that strengths and weaknesses are internal, and opportunities and threats are external when we look at the movement or human rights advocacy group. So to analyze those and to answer them correctly will help us use our strengths, change and improve our weaknesses, use the opportunities, and minimize threats as we proceed to build a campaign. So as you can see, we have the strategic questions about our own goals, our own vision, our own internal method, etc., etc. And this needs to be combined with the more analytical tool, which is the SWOT analysis. So this is another thing we didn't focus on much, but I also encourage you to look at the SWOT analysis as a tool, because it's very helpful. Because the analysis here is a very, very deep and profound, and it can actually answer a lot of questions, but it also takes a lot of time and effort to do it. So for the purpose of the exercise, we build a couple of campaigns, and you can even use them and build on them further. But the campaigns that we build as a result of analysis and strategic estimates need to start with several elements. And the first element, of course, and the most important one, is the campaign objective, which is the goal of the campaign, which is something we want to achieve with our campaign. So as you remember, we looked at the campaigns using the SMART criteria, and so we asked ourselves the following question: what is the objective of our campaign? And not just that we asked ourselves that, but we also used the SMART criteria to ask how specific this objective is. So we needed to make it specific enough so that it is not vague. It doesn't look like a long-term goal which you cannot really kind of focus on, because it's somewhere in the future and it may look like this or look like something else, but we maybe know the direction where it is going. We don't really know how it is going to look. The example of a long-term goal is, for instance, to build a democratic society or to promote accountability. But this is too vague and not specific enough for it to be a campaign objective. Campaign objective can be to have free elections, or elections that are observable by the independent observers. Or when it comes to accountability, the campaign objective would be to institute some sort of a commission that will make the politicians accountable, or something like that. But it needs to be specific, otherwise it will not be different from a long-term goal, which is a strategic level of planning. So then we talked about the next criteria, which is that the objective needs to be measurable, and that means that we need to know when or if it succeeded, when the campaign actually met the objective. This means that we need to know how are we going to measure our success. So, for instance, if we use the example that I just used, the elections that are observed by independent observers, this is measurable because you know if these observers are allowed to monitor the elections or not. So it would be easy to know how the campaign did on that. Otherwise, if it's just if the campaign goal would be free elections, then that wouldn't be measurable, because free can be measured by many standards. Achievable is another important criteria, and so the achievable objective means that by reading the objective, people get the sense that it can be done. So it's not something that is too grandiose and too impossible to how shall I say, to achieve, that people just think it's a nice wish, but without real applicability. So achievable is a criterion that is important one for the campaign to be interesting to the people who are going to take part in it, because it shows that the campaign can be implemented. Relevant means that actually the campaign is connected to the strategic considerations that we talked about, the long-term goal and the vision of the society, but also relevant to the situation, which means that the campaign focuses on an issue that is troublesome at the moment. It's not some marginal issue that nobody cares about. It's an important issue. It's also something that is going to be in accordance with the vision. And also the last of the criteria is that the campaign needs to be timely, which means that the campaign is actually going to be done within some reasonable time. Campaigns are as midterm plans are usually less than a year. Some campaigns are longer than that, but they also can be connected to a particular event, so that the campaign actually is focused on some event, and this is where actually this campaign is over and when it ends, so that we know that it is done in time, not something that keeps on happening no matter what. So this was the campaign objective, and this is the first thing that the campaign plan needs to have. So it's one sentence. If you remember the letter that Gandhi sent to Lord Irwin, and this is what you can find in the session number 3, this very short paragraph in that letter actually explains the whole plan and the campaign objective of the Salt March that Gandhi organized. And so this is exactly how the campaign objective looks for people who wanna read the campaign. So this is the first important element of the campaign plan. The next element, if you remember, is the target audience, and so we need to define who is the target audience of the campaign, or people who are going to be targeted by the campaign message. So we used SMART criteria to develop the campaign objectives. That was the tool that we used. In this case, we used another tool developed by George Lakey at Training for Change, and this is the spectrum of allies. And the spectrum of allies, as you see the little drawing in the lower right corner, actually positions different groups that we want to target with our campaign in different parts of the spectrum. From dedicated allies who are willing to act, to potential allies who are supportive but not willing to act, neutrals, passive opponents that are opposing but not willing to act, and on the other side of the spectrum are active opponents. These are people who are opposing our campaign and they are willing to act. And if you remember, the goal was to move them just a little bit to our side. So active opponents to turn them into passive opponents, passive opponents turn them into neutrals, neutrals into passive supporters, and passive supporters into active supporters. So the questions that we need to answer here using this tool is: who are the potential allies here? So these are the passive supporters that are still not part of the struggle, but they are inclining. Are they willing to offer any concrete support, and how can we actually have them offer that support? Who are some potential adversaries, And how willing are they to put up a fight? How willing are they to resist our campaign? In other words, what the campaign can do to neutralize them further and move them to the middle of the spectrum. And we also have to look at the middle of the spectrum and see who is still undecided, and to see how we can move these undecided people a little bit to our side, towards passive supporters. So we use this very practical tool called Spectrum of Allies to locate these groups. And then, after we did that, we actually had to develop tailored messages for each of those groups, and exactly to move them a little bit to the left. So in the message box for each of those groups, if you remember, in the this was the class number 4, we developed tailored messages. If you remember, we used the example of the anti-smoking campaign, and we asked ourselves, what do we say about us as a campaign? What do they say about them, meaning the target group? What do they say about us as a campaign, as a campaign effort, and what do we say about them as a target group? So there is an existing, maybe misconceptions, prejudices, things that we want to change, and then there is the planned, the designed message that we want to convey to them to overcome these prejudices. So if they have a negative attitude towards us, we are trying to bridge that, as well as the negative attitude that we might have towards them, and to reach out to them, only to move them a little bit to the left. So the goal still is not to move them completely to the left, because that is not going to be realistic. That's not going to be achievable. So this is the next tool that we used, which is the message box. And so then we looked at the implementation. And here, as you can see, implementation of online campaigns can be very, very technology driven, because there is so many things out there that you can use to convey your message. Especially when we talk about online campaigns, it's not about websites anymore. That was back in the day of the Web 1.0. With Web 2.0, and especially the advent of social media in the last couple of years, the possibilities are enormous. However, when we look at the right technology is the one that is going to create the biggest impact. So that sometimes is not the most popular technology. That is the technology that is going to reach our target audience. That is one thing. Another thing is that this technology is where the one that people can use and that they have access to. So, and of course, another thing is that, you know, we need to look at our safety and our own integrity as well. But we mostly focused on the way to convey the message using the technologies that are out there, but especially using blogging platforms. And there we looked at the way to write stories using the inverted pyramid structure and answering the 5W questions, and also looking at the way to use pictures by using some standards of photography that even like ordinary users can apply and make their pictures more interesting to the wider audience. So, as you can see, there are lots of services here on this slide, but maybe 5 or 6 are actually account for 90% of the web activity here when we talk about people and where they are. So the most important thing that is going to make the campaign interesting is not going to be the technology or the message, the messenger or the message channel, but rather a message and the content. So that's why we focused on content and looked at some standards of that. So this was the implementation. But then we also talked about management, and we talked about human, material resources and time. If you remember, when we talked about material resources, we were looking at always at finding low-cost alternatives to some of the proposed solutions. So we were trying to minimize the material resources needed for the campaign. So instead of TV commercials, we're looking at YouTube videos. Instead of paid ads in the newspapers, we're looking at the viral ads or viral posts that can spread virally. And we're looking at using internet as the channel of communication. But that means that we need to focus more on the human resources, and we also need to take care of the time. So there is one important aspect here, and that is the managing of volunteers, and I will come back to that later because this was one of the questions that was asked. But let me continue with this, and I'll come back to that. So managing human resources, material resources, and time is an important part of the campaign, because that is going to turn a series of blog posts, videos, and other actions with the message from a very short activity into a longer activity that can be called a campaign that lasts for many months. So managing volunteers is an important part of that, and I will look at it later. But as you remember, when we talked about time, and especially in the terms of campaign, which lasts for many months, we introduced another tool, which is the inverse planning tool, reverse planning tool, where we plan from the last day of the campaign, going back towards the first day of the campaign. So inverse planning is an important tool because it actually positions the important events right on time and maximizes impact of the campaign. And this will also help us manage human resources better, because we know the how much time do we have and where do we have enough time for extra activities. But yeah, that's about it. Thank you very much once again, and good luck.
اگر بارها دنبال واژه آموزش گشته اید ولی با درهای بسته روبرو شده اید، اگر دنبال آموزشکده‌ای گشته اید که دور نباشد و استادهای خوبی هم داشته باشد، اگر مشتاق آموختن هستید اما توانایی مالی کافی نداشته اید که بیشتر و بیشتر بخوانید و بدانید، اگر شبها وقت آزاد دارید و روزها نمیتوانید دنبال درس و کلاس بروید، توانا بهترین انتخاب شماست. توانا بود هر که دانا بود. توانا رایگان در اختیار شماست. آموزشکده‌ای در خانه شماست. هر وقت که بخواهید، شب یا روز. با درس‌هایی مانند حق و حقوق زنان، دموکراسی، تفسیرهای نوین و لیبرال از دین، حقوق اقلیت‌ها، حکومت قانون، نهادسازی و نهادهای مدنی، محیط زیست، روزنامه نگاری و امنیت فضای مجازی و موبایل‌های هوشمند. آموزشکده توانا کلاس‌های دلخواه شما را رایگان به منزل شما می‌آورد. در کلاس‌های توانا با نام و جیمیل مستعار ثبت نام کنید. برای ما مهم انگیزه شهروندی و علاقه شما به آموختن است. ما هرگز نام واقعی شما را نمی‌پرسیم. تیم فنی توانا از طریق سایت تواناتک به شما کمک می‌کند تا با خیال راحت و فارغ از دردسرهای امنیت وب در کلاس‌ها شرکت کنید. در توانا بیاموزید، با تواناتک پاسخ سوال‌های فنی خود را بگیرید و از صدها کتاب، ویدئو، آدیو و مدرک دیجیتال در کتابخانه توانا رایگان استفاده کنید. توانا پنجره آشنایی شما با جهان ایده‌های نو و تجربه مردم دیگر کشورها در گذار به دموکراسی. برای دسترسی به توانا و اطلاعات بیشتر به فیسبوک، توییتر، یوتیوب و گوگل پلاس توانا و تواناتک بپیوندید.